Hey, what's up everybody? In this video I put together a lightning build that gets pretty wild. It's a one button, really, that's all you use is one button. It gets pretty insane, but the thing is it's more of a complicated build than you would think for only using one button. We'll get into that when I'm going to do a Greater Rift 45 using this build, so let's get right to the skills. For my one button, I'm using Arcane Torrent with Static Discharge. Now, with this whole build, I'm trying to get as much damage as I can out of it. And the problem with Lightning is that it is very weak, inherently weak. So I want to get as many hits as I can from it as possible. So the build revolves around hitting enemies as many times, and then also increasing certain elements of the skills or damage of the skills. So that's my main one. Um, Casting this will also cast Meteor and Energy Twister because of the Sigil offhand that I have. And both of these are Thunder Crash and Storm Chaser. So Meteor works very well for huge amounts of damage. I get maybe up to 2 billion damage, fully buffed out without shrines or anything like that. And then Energy Twister, this is mainly for the pull that I get from my gear. So I also have 3 Conjurations. Magic Weapon with Electrify. This adds to all my damage that I do has a chance to cause a small chain lightning between enemies. Not very much damage, but it does build up, especially on large groups. I have Storm Armor with Shocking Aspect. This allows critical hits to have a chance to electrocute a nearby enemy 425%. So when it does do that, it does hit for quite a bit of damage. Also, it has one little perk to it that I'll talk about once I get to Kanai's Cube. I also have Familiar with Spark Flint. Now, this one I could change out with a lot of things. If I want to make it a little more, less, if I want to use 2 buttons, I could use Black Hole, with a supermassive Black Hole, the lightning damage one. But for right now, I want to keep it very simple. Just increase the damage. I know it's not lightning, it's fire, but for simplicity's sake, I'm using that. For my passive skills, Paralysis, of course, for better CCs and also ties in with one of my legendary gems. I'm using Glass Cannon for the increased damage, and to offset that, I'm using Blur for decreased damage taken. And then finally, Audacity. Now, this build works the best at close range, and you'll see why when I go through the gear. But this one is a big damage boost for 30% additional damage for nearby enemies, so I highly recommend it. If you're going to go with exactly this build, Audacity is the way to go. So for the gear, what I have is the Legacy of Nightmares set, the 2-piece set, and now everything is ancient that I have. Now that's the biggest problem with Legacy of Nightmares is it's hard to pick up every ancient that you want in the set. It took me a lot of farming to get what I have, and I still want different pieces or better rolls. So that's the thing, is that you could build what you want essentially, but it does take quite a bit. So for my weapon, I'm using the Fulminator. Out of all the weapons, I've found that this seems to work the best. And what it does is that lightning damage, since this is all lightning damage, has a chance to turn enemies into lightning rods, causing them to pulse for 552 weapon damage. As lightning every second to nearby enemies for 6 seconds. So this helps with my overall AOE. So when I hit a whole bunch of enemies with a whole bunch of lightning damage, they will in turn into little lightning rods, as it says here, and then they will do more damage to more enemies. And it's kind of like this building of different ways of firing lightning into enemies. So this seems to help the best. Now you can go with a Thunder Fury, and that's for better single target, and it also really does help. It's kind of a toss up, and I find that I like this one a little better. Thunder Fury does work very well though. For my offhand, I'm using Etch Sigil. Now this is the reason why I only have to use one button, is because Arcane Torrent will cast any other Arcane power spenders. So I like to keep it to 2. That way I'm not getting a long period where I'm not dropping a meteor or I'm not casting a Arcane Twister. So I like to keep it at 2. Now, one nice thing is that if you use Black Hole, since it is on a separate cooldown, about an 8-second cooldown, that doesn't really mess with only having 2 because it's on a cooldown. So you can kind of randomly expect it to get thrown in, but it's not constantly casting something else besides your 2 mains. So that's the one that I would use in place of Familiar. the black hole, and then I change up the rim or ring that I'm using. But we'll get into that in a little bit. For my gloves, I'm using Gloves of Worship. These are pretty good. Shrine effects last for 10 minutes. Not so good in Greater Rifts because shrines don't appear, or at least I haven't seen any. It would kind of break the Greater Rift if you were able to have, say, Frenzy for 10 minutes. So these work great outside, but really for me, I'm just using them for the stats and the ancient buff. Mantle of Channeling for my shoulders. This is actually a very, very good one. Because I'm using Arcane Torrent so much, when I'll get a 20% damage increase up to 25 with a good roll, but for right now 20, and also take 25% reduced damage. So these are the best shoulders by far for any if you're using any of those. What is it? Disintegrate, Arcane Torrent, or Ray of Frost. For my helm, I'm using Leoric's Crown. Increase the effects of any gem socketed by 91% for this roll. You can get up to 100. So that's given me about, 38% increased life. So I'm rolling with 1.3 million life. So I'm very tanky. Since this is a close range build, I wanted to boost that up. So I have that along with the set bonus from Legacy of Nightmares. So since I have 13 pieces, that'll give me 40... 52% damage reduction, and then with this life, and then also I have the Aquila Cures for my chest, and while above 90% primary resources, all damage is reduced by 50%. So with the 50, and then also I have Unity with my Enchantress from Kanai's Cube. That's another 50, so I'm only taking 12.5% of the total damage, the output that the enemies can put out. So for my waist, I'm using Hergbrash's Binding. Now this is what allows me to use Arcane Torrent indefinitely. Actually this and on my Edge sigil I have critical hits grant 4 Arcane Power. So with those combined, since this does not completely eliminate the Arcane Power use, the critical hits gaining, also with just the natural regeneration of it, I have unlimited Arcane Torrent. For legs, this is just a placeholder until I find better. Just an ancient set pants that's just one piece, doesn't help, just for the stats. For my boots, I have Nilfer's Boast, which is a huge damage increase for Meteor. It'll double the damage and almost triple the damage for this roll. You could actually triple the damage for 3 or fewer enemies, so must have if you're ever going to use Meteor in any build. For my wrists, I'm using Ranslor's Folly. Energy Twister periodically pulls in lesser enemies within 30 yards. Now this makes speed running very quick because you could pull in pretty much the entire screen of enemies, or even enemies that are off screen, depending on where the Energy Twister decides to pull, into a very tight group. And then since I'm doing so much damage at once to tightly knit enemies, that this makes it so I could annihilate whole screens of enemies in just seconds. And like I said, I got the 2-piece Legacy of Nightmares. Squirt's Necklace just for the stats. And for my legendary gems, I'm using Bane of the Trapped. Anytime I have a control impairing effect on an enemy, it increases my damage by 27% to them. And also I gain an aura. So this is one of the reasons why I like being up close to enemies with this build, is because the aura within 15 yards slows them down, so that's a constant control impairing effect. So right now I'm only working off stuns beyond 15 yards, so that helps. For my second one, I got Bane of the Powerful, gain 20% increased damage for 70 seconds after killing an elite pack. Now, at first, you'll be a little bit weaker until you find that first elite, at least when I run. Once I kill that elite, I'll get a 20% damage increase. It's definitely noticeable when you get that kind of buff. And then finally, of course I have to have Wreath of Lightning for a lightning build. So 15% chance on hit to gain Wreath of Lightning, dealing 1,000 weapon damage. Is lightning for every second for 3 seconds. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not that much. Essentially, it's there for the procs and the added damage. And it really does help when you just keep adding lightning to it, or lightning to this build. Also, the secondary on it is, while I'm under the effects of it, I gain 25% increased movement speed. As you see, I don't have any teleport or anything like that, so really I'm just rolling off a 25% increased movement speed along with that when it procs. So that's it for the gear. My main stats are critical hit chance 41%, critical hit damage 456%. That's about it. Nothing really crazy. Attack speed isn't very high or anything. For Kanai's cube, now this is a crazy one. I haven't used this too much just because it only works with 3 different damage types. But for this build, it works fucking great. I've used all the different lightning legendaries, from Schaefer's Hammer to Odin's Sun to just everything. And this one works the best for this build because it triggers Charge Bolt every time I cast a Arcane Torrent charge or whatever the hell you want to call it. So this fires 3 charged bolts that each do 250% damage. And not only that, storm armors. This is one thing I've noticed. When storm armor periodically shocks an enemy, it'll actually cast another charged bolt, so that increases the amount of charged bolts you fire. For my armor, I'm using strong arm bracers. Enemies hit by knockback suffer 30% more damage when they land. So this works very well with energy twisters that pull in lesser enemies. So they'll take in or take more damage. And also, one thing that's nice is that my Enchantress has Forceful Push. Now, she summons an Arcane Explosion that can knock back elites. Now, it won't knock back huge enemies or bosses, but this works very well for getting damage bonuses for the leads from her. And then finally, I'm using Unity, like I said earlier, on both my Enchantress and me, and her focus allows her not to die, so that's a 50% damage reduction. So let's go. I'm just going to start a Greater Rift, level 45, 10, Torment 10. And I'm only going to use one button, as you see, but that's all it really takes for this build. So what I really want to usually try to do is I try to find an elite pack, get that bonus, and then after I get that bonus, it's easy rolling. But right there you can see that enemies getting pulled are very susceptible to all the huge amounts of damage that builds up. And the damage numbers aren't that great, like say, I don't know, 50 to 250 million, but you have to understand that the number of times you're getting hit, especially in groups, I don't even think the damage numbers really show it, because it would just be too much, because there's so many different things going on at once that oh come on, that it makes it very hard to even tell what killed them or what's really going on. It's hard to see in the middle of all this shit, but it's a very fun build to use. I've actually farmed probably about 50 level 45 Greater Rifts, just, getting gear and everything out of it, getting gems up. And it's very easy to use. And the nice thing is, what I can do is I can just click once, and it'll either cast a meteor or an energy twister, both of which are very powerful. Because if everything gets pulled in, they just kind of explode. And then if they get hit by a meteor, then it does so much damage that, depending on what they are, they're either going to instantly die or be on the verge of death. And also, meteor helps out a lot with its damage over time it leaves on the ground, because that's even more lightning damage. So instead of just a single hit, which wouldn't help out this build that much. Oh yeah, I did get a dimensional power, so now I'm doing huge amounts of damage. So when you do get buffed by anything, really, the damage just goes through the roof, even increase attack speed. But as you see, it's best used when up close. So especially when you get the Arcane Twister to pull everything in like that, up close to you, now you're doing huge amounts of damage. And then on top of that, you're getting the damage bonus from the bracers from Kanai's cube that I had. I can't remember, strong arm? And that boosts my damage by 30% on all those enemies that just got pulled. So, actually a very good build. I was pleasantly surprised at how powerful it can get when enemies are grouped. Especially, like, say, these guys. since they're grouped up like that, and enemies keep getting pulled in, the more enemies that you have, the more damage everything takes. It's channeling. There are a lot of pylons in here. But it is nice. Very simple when you could have the enemies just getting pulled in. If you're fighting tougher enemies, what'll happen is the lesser enemies will start walking in, and then before they even get close, they'll get pulled in, and then get hit by everything, increase the amount of damage you're doing to the group, and then die. And then so really you just need to focus on the weaker enemies. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for the build. What else can I say about it? It's nice to see that, you know, I can make a lightning build that's actually fun to play and does tear some shit up. Of course it's not the most powerful build, but who the fuck wants that? You break the game making builds like that for yourself. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button. It helps me a lot. It makes me figure out. I mean, you know, I don't know how it helps in the long run for YouTube and everything. I'm sure it, you know, for suggested videos or whatever. But for me, it shows me what people like, and then it allows me to modify and change how my videos are to make it so that people, you know, just can get more enjoyment out of them, to put it that way. So anyway, like I said, very tanky. Oh, I already made it. I guess we're going to kill this guy before the end of it. Unexpected. So, all I'm going to do with this guy is just get up in his grill and just burn him. I can take the damage. Typically. Sometimes, you can kind of see it coming that that's not going to work, but... Hey, a couple swords. So anyway, like I said, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more. I should be coming out with a couple more videos here in the next couple days. So, alright, have a good one. Thanks for watching.